Chefs Without Restaurants, episode 78 with Shola from Studiokitchen.
Cultural appropriation is a problem in society. Food is not necessarily the place to start with that argument. Racism is. Cultural exclusion is. Not allowing people to move into certain neighborhoods. Again, which all go back to like some sort of, race-based unfairness in many ways, or culturally based. And then there's the whole idea of true cultural appropriation, where it's like somebody makes a strong case to promote something through the eyes of another culture. Like, for example, if somebody at Food and Wine magazine wants to do a story about hush puppies or fried green tomatoes, and rather than understand that, slaves were given like green tomatoes at the end of the year and they just battered and fried them because that's maybe like the only way you can eat them. They have like Paula Dean's sons like talking about like texture and all this other bullshit,
Yeah.
What are you doing? Like, that's cultural appropriation.
This is the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast with your host, Chris Spear. Each week, I'll be speaking with food entrepreneurs and people in the culinary industry. If you're interested in learning more about our organization dedicated to helping people build and grow their food businesses, look us up on the web at chefswithoutrestaurants.com and .org, and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Chefs Without Restaurants. Now, enjoy the show. Welcome to the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. I'm your host, Chris Spear. On the show, I have conversations with culinary entrepreneurs and people in the food and beverage industry who took a different route. They're caterers, research chefs, personal chefs, cookbook authors, food truckers, farmers, cottage bakers, and all sorts of culinary renegades. I myself fall into the personal chef category as I started my own personal chef business, Perfect Little Bites, 10 years ago. And while I started working in kitchens in the early 90s, I've literally never worked in a restaurant. This week, I have Shola of Philadelphia's Studiokitchen. Shola is a research chef who often works with culinary equipment companies like Polyscience and Rationale. He also hosts small dinners showcasing his contemporary cooking techniques. Shola's worked with some of the best chefs, including George Perrier at Le Bec Fin. He's one of my very favorite chefs. I consider him to be the epitome of a chef without a restaurant. For as long as I've known Shola, which is probably 10 years now, he hasn't worked in a traditional restaurant setting. He started doing pop-ups and collaborative dinners way back in 2002, long before it was a thing. He most recently finished a month-long residency with Chef Dan Barber at Stone Barns in New York State. Our conversation took place just as he was starting his time there, and he just finished up last week. I strongly encourage everyone to go check out his Instagram, which is @Studiokitchen. He's always posting interesting cooking techniques and recipes, and you should really see what he was doing with his native Nigerian cuisine up at Stone Barns. We also discuss staging, cultural appropriation, and cooking techniques, amongst other things. I hope you enjoy our conversation. I'd love for you to subscribe to the show, and if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a rating and a review. Now, on with the show. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great week. Hey, Shola, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Chris. Sorry I couldn't make it earlier today, but I'm in a much better mood with less to do.
Yeah, I find that I actually enjoy recording in the evening as opposed to the morning anyway. Kind of the household is quiet for background noise, and I can kind of have a more calm, quiet conversation anyway.
That's good. I'm currently in a hotel room of sorts, while cooking at Blue Hill. Yeah.
Very, very comfy digs, I'm sure.
Well, it's comfy enough. You just cook and sleep. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of my listeners know who you are. I've probably known about you for like 10 years now. And when I think of like Chefs Without Restaurants, which is, my organization and my podcast, you're definitely one of those people. I mean, for as long as I've known of you, you haven't been a restaurant chef. But, I think of you as someone working kind of at a very high game, doing really interesting, awesome, creative stuff. And I really wanted to hear a little bit about how you got into that, maybe why you're not working in a restaurant. But I guess kind of from the beginning, where are you from and how did you get into food and cooking?
Well, I'm Nigerian, like just about everyone else who was not born here, through some measure of immigration, ended up in the United States. And I kind of found myself in the restaurant industry. I worked for Georges Perrier, a Lebec friend in Philadelphia, for some number of years, which was just classic French food, but very technique rich environment. You learn a lot. You work at a fast pace. It was great. Another chef before that who was also French, and I kind of started working for the restaurateur types, Steven Starr, blah 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 blah. It was at that point I kind of had to reevaluate why I was in the food industry. To go back a bit, when I was living in West Africa, I used to cook, and I cooked out of both curiosity and family obligations. We all participated in cooking. That's, your mom's making like a rice dish, you help chop something. Next time, maybe 3 times later, you're making the rice dish. That's how I learned how to cook basic things, at least certain things from my culture. So it goes from there. It also probably intersects with the fact that I had this maybe slightly unhealthy fascination with fire when I was growing up. So I was very curious about how things burned. I didn't turn into an arsonist or anything like that, but I'm very curious about the rate of combustion, which led to just some interesting physics that I never pursued. But it kind of manifested itself in barbecue, if you would, cooking on fire outside, roasted, just watching the transformation of ingredients with flames, certainly not as eloquent as Francis Malman, but
yeah, that was really cool to see him cook in person. I don't know if I'll ever get to see anything like that again.
Well, after COVID, we will, hopefully. So it was great to see him to cook like that, and that really just, I guess, set the seeds of some amount of continuing interest in food, not just from a consumption perspective, but from a creativity and tactile, composition and preparation of food. Yeah. So as I continued to grow up, even though cooking was not my thing, my parents were very sort of respectful, but stringent in the sense that certainly they expected us to be educated in a formal sense, go to college, high school, all that stuff. They didn't choose careers for us. But I eventually settled into the food business to basically not really have any interest in doing anything else. Food was like a hobby that became a serious vocation. And then, I went down that same path, some, reasonable amount of culinary education, but really you learn from working in good restaurants and doing stages and other things like that. So I pursued elements of that, went to Fat Duck in the UK, did a very short stage because it would have been longer, but I didn't feel like stages were beneficial in all restaurants. It certainly didn't seem like it was in that one, as much as it may sound ungrateful in any way. A lot of restaurants just really abused the whole concept and made it like you can just make the things we want you to make, and we're not really teaching you anything. Like I could stay in Philly and separate grapefruit segments. There's no reason for me to fly.
Yeah, you're not learning anything really.
Exactly, to do that. So but I do understand their position, it's like they want to trade their payroll for the illusion of teaching you how to cook. But it led to what I think was one of the more negative periods of the food industry, where people were just opening restaurants based on the ability to not have to pay for the accurate staff that would run it to the degree that it was. So that was unfortunate about the industry. But I think we've gotten to a point where we've gotten past that just about now. I bring this story not to be negative, but it does offer some amount of cynicism that made me take the choices that I made after that, which was I'm not really interested in working for anyone who doesn't either pay enough or create an environment where you can either learn and grow, or maybe you do your own thing, run your own restaurant, which is a whole different set of headaches, So I decided to start Studiokitchen as a rather experimental think tank, and it was bare bones. Like I had like nothing. I had like a stove and like a couple of pots.
When was that?
2002, and I started these dinners. They were like pop-ups, and I don't think anyone was even saying pop-up at the time. Like I don't want to say I'm the first person to claim to do a pop-up dinner, but nobody was saying pop-up in 2002 when I started Studiokitchen. And then I moved into like doing dinners with chefs who thought I was doing different things, and it was like a collaboration. And those wouldn't happen back then too. So some people still write me today and say like, you started the collaboration dinner. Like I'm like, yeah, well, that's perhaps true, but that's not the hill I want to die on and have like other chefs like start making it a point of criticism. I have better things to do. So as I continued to evolve, though, what I did took notice, and there were some very helpful people who kind of reached out to me, and I worked with them. One of the very first was Paul Science, because I, like you, have been to many of the original Star Chefs ICCs, and that's where I intersected with them, and they loved that I wasn't like a chef in a restaurant, but I was doing like some of the coolest things with the equipment. And the first time I straight up just like bought like what I needed from like the little money I made. And once they knew like what I was doing, they gave me like a huge discount every time after that. And at some point in the last few years, they just like give me like stuff I need for events. Like, you want a control freak? Here you go. I'm like, they're really amazing people. So if I can say like one person has supported me very much in my career, it's probably Philip Preston, Conrad, David, those guys, Paul Science, and now Breville with the split, and Rationale. So building this brand relationships helps to also think about technology as far as what they're making. So they reach out to you in the development phase of many things they're doing, and they're like, hey, we think we're going to make this new circulator. Do you think you should have a probe or not? Or it's your real world situations. So that's always helped. And just set Studiokitchen as a known entity for if I want to buy something cool or if I want to redesign my kitchen, should I talk to Shola? Now, as a matter of fact, that's not a service that I offer and charge anyone for. People just know me and they're like, hey, listen, we're thinking about buying a blast chiller. Should we? Is it worth it? I'm like, of course it's worth it. Don't be silly, And they're not giving me a card or anything. I just recommend it and I tell them what's smart. Because I think if we all cook smarter, we all make better food. We have more time to treat people better instead of, building Stone Age kitchens and making people run around like jackasses just to make food. It should be cool, comfortable, well equipped, and a pleasure to not compromise on your methods and techniques.
Yeah, having seen your place firsthand, it's amazing the equipment you have.
And that's a lot of years of work to amass all that stuff and work on those things, Which, a lot of people seem to think you live the life of luxury and you're lucky. People just give me free stuff. I'm like, they don't. I come to the table with something to offer them to justify their expenses and readily give back. I share a ton of intellectual property. I mean, I charge what would be reasonable for my time to do projects for people. And sometimes I'll do them in trade, which is why I have I have access to what I'm able to use. So that's good. But on a larger point, beyond just like technology and cooking, I think what Studiokitchen allows is just to have conversations about cultures and ingredients and other methods and techniques of looking at food and expand your flavor palette and your technical cooking skill or approach to cooking, in fact. So I kind of make it like an open architecture type of environment to talk to people and be intellectually curious and offer solutions. That's what it is. Yeah.
So do you really enjoy doing the small dinners?
Small dinners are great because, like the smallest dinners I do are for like 8 to 10 people. So it's not necessarily small. However, it is detailed, So I dedicate a full day to the prep. It's no less, extravagant than, in most cases, a serious restaurant of the same caliber, I have, in most cases, better equipment and more time. So I can do anything I want. Even though I may be doing it alone, but, think of it, I don't have to wait for, if I get this spark, I want to make this ice cream. I can process it, package it, 3 hours in the blast chiller, as opposed to wait until tomorrow, serve it in like 6 hours from now. Done.
Yeah, the last dinner I came to there, the food was as fancy and delicious as any restaurant I had been to.
Yeah, it's and that's what planning time and efficiency allows you to do, which is why I do that. So I enjoy the dinners because they also allow me to test ideas. I keep writing down these notebooks with little snippets here and there. Just walking down the street or driving somewhere, you think of an idea, you write it down, and then you kind of scan through them later in the week, later in the month, and just, you know what, maybe it's time to execute this, coconut stout caramel, and see if there's anything good to it and where it's going to go, pork ribs or like burnt ends of bacon.
It seems you seem to be executing that at a much higher rate than I think a lot of us. Like, I have tons of notebooks with things that I just haven't executed, maybe because I haven't figured out how to do it. But looking through just your Instagram of all the stuff that you seem to be churning out, it's very innovative, things I would never think of, and you get it done. It seems like you have a million things going on at once.
Well, so this is the thing with that. It's very funny. A lot of people either say that, which I consider a compliment, thank you, or they call it what's it called? Flexing, showing off, or something like that. I'm like, I'm not begging anyone to follow me. In fact, my account is like private, I just do what I do and I put it out there. You should be thanking me, but that's fine. It's okay. I don't need to be thanked either, But the thing is, every time I'm doing something, even if it's not to completion, snapshot, just take a photo. I keep taking photos. I take maybe 25 photos a day. And I have so much to cycle through that I'm, when I feel like it's the right time to make the right narrative, then I'll write the story and just go with it. Yeah. But everything I do is relatively recent. And yes, I do spend a lot of time on conception and creativity. Yes.
When you start conceiving components, it sounds like you don't always have a dish in mind, right? Like, you make some kind of condiment and then you figure out what it goes with, or are you thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead where you know what the complete dish is? What's the process like?
It's both, you can decide. I can decide I want to do a roasted carrot dish and I'm going to figure out what to put on the plate besides carrots. I know the carrots will be there. The carrot puree will be there. But I understand the textures of those things. But there needs to be an element of crunch. There needs to be an element of temperature variation. There needs to be an element of vegetable earthiness. So you can just go in any direction by making those what do you call it? Changes to the dish or creating the components that you want. So as long as you take in context, temperature, texture, color, I don't know what else, mouthfeel. You can add as much stuff to a plate of food as you want before it becomes excessive. That is the challenge, is how to edit things into good.
I talk about that all the time, especially now, that I work by myself. I think when you work at a restaurant, and you have all these hands, especially in a place where, I've said you've got all these stages and there's like 17 people plating up food. I think you can get carried away. When I go out and do my personal chef dinner, I execute alone, or I have 1, maybe 2 people with me, but it really taught me editing. Like, how many things do I need to put on the plate to make it delicious? Like, I don't have 4 sauces and 100 different micro herbs and a duel of proteins. Like, it just doesn't work. And I've really learned to edit. And I think that's been good for me.
Yeah, it's very important to be able to have restraint in cooking, because you can have the best ideas and just swarm them with, especially in this age now where fermentation is like taking center stage in terms of flavor adjustment and component making. Besides the just straight lacto fermentation of vegetables, there's also the whole concept of koji and amino acids and mesos and all this stuff. So, one thing I do say is, like, at some point you have to cook. You can keep making all kinds of stuff and making all kinds of stuff. And I'm actually myself at the point where I'm like, okay, I have so much stuff that's not going to go bad because it's all really good and really held properly at temperature. So, time to make the food, which is why Blue Hill works out well because I get to test some of my really great amino compounds and flavors in the real world, you know.
Let's jump into that. What is Blue Hill and what is this thing you're doing right now?
So, as you know, Blue Hill is Blue Hill's Sunburn Center for Agriculture, and maybe the best well-known restaurant in the country, thanks to their very single and unique focus in nature and animal husbandry. You know, uh, it's just an amazing place to be. Uh, so, as you know, Chef Dan Barber also works with the Stone Barns Foundation. So he's not just a chef. You know, he's a chef and a teacher and a mentor to many people. And he decided to step back, especially during this pandemic time where things were actually a little slow to do something a bit more creative, which is to have chef residencies, have a chef come from somewhere else that checks like certain boxes. They'd like it to be diverse, it to be, you know, culturally promotional and appropriate, and a conversation with the cooks to learn and exchange ideas and education within the community, and bring in other artisans. Like they made like plates, bowls for this residence. It's crazy, like stuff that most restaurants can't even buy on a normal basis. They had stuff made, you know. So it's such a big depth of dedication to walk into this place and just you basically like handed the keys into, it's like you're driving like a VW bug and someone give you the keys to like a Ferrari. It's like, hey, do you want to borrow my car for a month? I'm like, hell yes, you know.
So you're gonna be up there for what, like a month?
Yeah, a month. And I'm responsible for the menu, and all the cooks are working with me. And then we're also doing some charity stuff where we're doing boxes to be donated to obviously people who can afford like $250 worth of tasting menu. So it's not just about fancy rich people coming to eat. There's a kind of a connection to the community, to the farmers, to try to get everyone's product to move through this whole ecosystem. Yeah, is what it's about. So it's very exciting. Yeah.
And this is what, your food? You're doing like Nigerian food with.
I feel like my interpretation of what Nigerian flavors are, with like some variation. I don't want to just make Nigerian food. You can get that in Queen, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I can do more than that. Not better, just more than that to kind of bridge the conversation of cultural relevance and what do you call it? And exposing people to different ideas, different cultures, you know. One thing we're doing here with this food is also not necessarily relying on the tradition of using bouillon cubes to enhance everything, like many West African countries seem to suffer for, you know. And that has the unintended effect of creating like other health problems, high sodium, high blood pressure, hypertension. You know. So we're also having that conversation on how health plays into the role of technique in cuisine.
Now, what are they doing up there for growing stuff? I mean, it's cold. Are they have like indoor growing?
They have multiple greenhouses, and they also have things covered outside that are sheltered. Like they're growing a lot of kale, they're growing a ton of carrots, they're growing stuff. So obviously not as much as in the spring and summer, but like they're still growing, and they have farms around them growing other things that they partner with, so they can get potatoes, they can get these things. You know.
How long have you been working on menus and recipes for this?
I've been since probably about 2 months ago. I've been thinking of ideas and menus, and it only always comes together in the last 3 days. You know, we have ideas, we have menus, we make them, we taste them, we fix them. We had a first tasting today. You know, it went well. Everybody seemed happy. I'm not one who accepts accolades on the first day. You know, there's probably like a good 35% of the menu that needs to be tweaked. Some things need to be fried differently. Sauces need to change viscosity. I want to kind of up amp some flavors, and you know, it can be better. Yeah.
Is it a normal restaurant season? Like restaurants open a couple days a week? Is that how this is operating?
Well, so obviously, Blue Hill is in Westchester County, not in New York, so they're not subject to the closed restrictions in New York. This place is very spread out. The case levels are below what the county requires to close indoor dining. But even separate from that, Stone Barn's the cavernous place. The place is huge, you know. So rather than sit like the 125 people they would serve a night doing like a 11-course tasting menu, They are doing 30 people a night, spread all over the property, you know,
That sounds
well,
fun.
with good access to the kitchen. And so, you know, most restaurants have seen like 6 foot social distancing. They're doing like 15 feet social distancing. And windows are open, heat is on, it's cozy, you know, hot food. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. So people are looking at this and think it's like, why am I going to an expensive tasting menu in a restaurant indoors and during COVID? It's not. It's not really like that. The restaurant is basically operating below its capacity within the restrictions. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite things you've created for it so far? Things that you think are really stand out?
Well, we've been able to harness like the basic, some of the stews in Nigeria, but modify them in a way that they appeal to both the contemporary cooking that you're used to in the restaurant and also the season. Like we have a pheasant dish, and we're wrapping it around egusi stew, which is a pumpkin seed stew in Nigeria, and we're doing it with roast pheasant, and the stew has pheasant like confit in it. So it's just really, really kind of earthy and delicious, but also has like a lot of traditional flavor.
Any thoughts on ever making a cookbook? Is that something that you would ever do?
Well, chefs don't make cookbooks.
They do have them produced for them, though.
Yeah, cookbooks make chefs. That's how it works. And very few people have the clout to say, I want to have a cookbook, unless they plan on publishing it themselves through the Apple store. Then you can have a cookbook. But the cookbook world is one of the most bizarre kind of concepts in America. I'm not even saying this to be aggy. It's just like weird. Every time someone's approached me to do a cookbook, and they're all very nice people. I'm well intended. It's like a writer, a photographer, a co-writer, anything. And you start to go through the process, and I just look at it at the end of the day, like, what a publisher wants and what they're going to give you. It's just not worth my time. It's like I do all this work, meet all these deadlines, do all this photography, go buy your own stuff as a first-time author to like put it, and they take like 95% of the sales or something. I'm like, I don't have time for that at this time in my life. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
No, not at all. I'm just sure there's lots of people who'd love to see all the info in your notebooks.
No, I continue to share it, and I said that as a have to. At some point, I'm actually considering like just like putting together my manuscript in a sensible way with like a smart. I know some really good writers to like clean up the stuff and just go to like a self-publishing format and just have as many copies as I need published and sell them, through Amazon or something like that. Full e-commerce. I'll shoot some of my own pictures. I hire someone to shoot pictures, but the whole like publisher BS of like, whoa, we spent like $80,000 on the photography budget, so we need to make that.
Yeah, I'd buy a copy of your hard drive, just like rip it off to another one.
I've worked too hard to just like give my shit away.
No, totally.
I want to do a cookbook. I love to hear compliments from friends like you and people who are doing. I used to go to staff shows and people would come up to me like, to the degree that I would like look behind them like, who are you talking to? Me? Like,
well, I don't think most people would even have the equipment to pull half of it off anyway. It's like, I love the Noma fermentation book, and I just look through it. It's like, oh, where do I start? I don't even know that like I read it and I admire it, and I don't even know that half of that stuff or a quarter of the stuff I could execute,
I'll tell you my goal in doing what I do also, and this is something very important to me, is to go through the process, even if it needs like some high-tech thing. But ultimately, is to distill what is possible without any of the, expensive equipment to see like, can we make really good sauce? Can we make really good garum? Can you, instead of having a fermentation chamber, can I use a rice cooker for this? So that's also part of the conversation, because I think it reaches a larger audience and it inspires more people than just like super esoteric cooking all the time.
Any other big projects you're working on?
I expect to take like a 1-week vacation after this.
Just one.
Just to like relax and breathe, and just one. But in this day and age, and I'm sure you'll agree, where we're not exactly being, making loads of money like we used to, as soon as I'm done here, I'd be a fool to skip Valentine's Day, where people will probably pay me tons of money to make dinners for two.
Yeah. Yeah. Business has been so weird. It's been up and down and, it comes in waves and you got to take it when it comes
Yeah,
for
the
sure.
one thing I found is the vacations were like very lucrative. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, and Valentine's Day is like the freaking Super Bowl of like dinner for two takeout.
Oh, I know. I wish I could clone myself just for a few small days.
Exactly. Yeah.
And vacation, I mean, nobody's traveling. Actually, the last place I went was Philly. I was up at the Philly Chef Conference in March, and that was like the last thing, like it was like 2 weeks before the shutdown, and that's the last place essentially I've been other than my house and going out for a little work. What are some of your favorite things for culinary inspiration? Like, who are you looking at? Chefs, cookbooks? Like, where's some of your inspiration coming from these days?
I mean, books are always a good thing, just to see like what people are thinking and how they put together the thought processes. But don't look at it as just like trying to do what someone else is doing or like trying to emulate them. Books are definitely, I always advocate for books because that takes a lot for people to share accurately what they do. I like that. But beyond books, I think my bigger inspirations are to get out and see, smell, and touch food. One thing I always encourage young cooks today to like, what are you doing on your day off? Once you go to like a neighborhood, obviously somewhere safe that serves that other cultures exist in, and just go to the grocery stores. There's Newark, New Jersey. Go there and go to like all the Dominican, Peruvian grocery stores that sell like ají panca and ají amarillo and all this other stuff you're not going to see at Whole Foods. And see that you're in America. You have access to so many things that people don't have in other countries. And you should go and see and test. Like the Cambodian neighborhoods, the Laotian neighborhoods, the Vietnamese neighborhoods. There's all these people with food that they eat that we in the mainstream don't really look at unless we go to like, some weird like place like, Go Goat, or something.
Yeah.
That says like, Chinese food.
And I don't even want to like open this box. I mean, I've seen you talk a lot about it, but then there's the whole cultural appropriation thing, right? Because then this cook goes to this market and finds some ingredients and starts making things, and then people start calling him out for like using these ingredients that aren't of their culture. So
I think that's silly. So there are a couple of competing things. It's just that people don't have the discipline to see that they're having slightly different conversations. Cultural appropriation is a problem in society. Food is not necessarily the place to start with that argument. Racism is. Cultural exclusion is. Not allowing people to move into certain neighborhoods. Again, which all go back to like some sort of, race-based unfairness in many ways, or culturally based, you see. And then there's the whole idea of true cultural appropriation, where it's like somebody makes a strong case to promote something through the eyes of another culture. Like, for example, if somebody at Food and Wine magazine wants to do a story about hush puppies or fried green tomatoes, and rather than understand that, slaves were given like green tomatoes at the end of the year and they just battered and fried them because that's maybe like the only way you can eat them. And then they turn out to be really tasty. They have like Paula Dean's sons like talking about like texture and all this other bullshit,
Yeah.
What are you doing? Like that's cultural appropriation. But like you, Mr. X, going to a grocery store and saying like, I'm very curious about Vietnamese food. I'm gonna make a pho that has like brisket and add like pastrami spices to it. I think that's great. You're not claiming to be Vietnamese and you're not claiming to be like the king of Rosh Hashanah. You're just making fun food. It's okay. It's totally fun, And I think that the cultural appropriation accusers often miss the boat in terms of trying to shoot themselves in the face rather than understand that some exposure to other cuisines, I think, generally helps the cuisine. And like no one is saying they're being authentic about something. Like rightfully, if you make bad food, you make bad food. Like if you make like you saw the whole Stephanie Izard rice bowl thing that happened a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Well, it was a shitty rice bowl. That's the problem. She should have made a better rice bowl and called it a rice bowl instead of saying it was bibimbap. It wasn't bibimbap. But do I care that she called it bibimbap? No, and neither should you. But it was a bad dish for a chef of that caliber with a restaurant of that caliber, just to sell like meat from like a commodity giant meat purveyor. It's like everything that was bad about it was not what anyone complained about. They were just like, white woman cooking Korean food, this is bad. That's completely ridiculous. She can cook whatever she wants. So my position is a little bit more narrow than either side of the complaint. Those who think there's some people who say like people should be able to cook whatever they want and nobody should be able to tell them what they want. I'm like, everyone's open to criticism. If you cook bad food, people should tell you cook bad food. If part of the reason your food is bad is you're convinced it's better, then you deserve every rightful roast that you get. Like
Yeah.
never say I make it better XXX than people of that culture. Like just don't ever do that. I'm okay with you making the food. Don't say I make better food than Vietnamese people because I put this in it. Like none of the things you put in it are Vietnamese. I'm like, no, because that's not what they do. And if you've changed it and you're saying like it's better because you changed it, then you're an asshole,
It's a very slippery slope there,
Exactly, yeah. So, but you should be able to cook. Think of ingredients, Chris, as the periodic table, Those elements will meet each other in some ways in the lab. And sometimes they're good reactions, and sometimes they're very bad ones, And sometimes you have to wear a gas mask and leave in a hurry.
Oh yeah, I've made some stinkers in my day.
Yeah, so but that, but you will see that from what you do. I don't think cultural appropriation should just be like litigated to food all the time. You should talk about access, like the New York Times story today on like how high-end restaurants have failed Black women chefs. I think it's a great story. But then people put it on social media, and what happens? A bunch of white dudes start complaining about the story. Like, guys, this is why there is a story.
Yeah, maybe sit this one out and just let other people have the conversation.
Like, please, I don't know, the laughter eye roll emoji that comes out after things like that happen.
And now there's so many markets now. Like I didn't grow up with access to so many of these products, and you almost become like a kid in a candy store, right? Like I just grew up in a place with like normal grocery stores. And I think at some point you're like, wow, now I have like Mexican markets and Asian markets. And I think a lot of people just get overwhelmed and want to start buying a bunch of stuff and playing with things.
And just play with things, like understand that what you're doing could be tasty and could be fun, but just be careful with your language and how you do it. Like everybody wants to make everything into a taco today. Korean tacos, other people, African tacos, blah, 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 blah. A taco is a thing. Like maybe like go find out like the regional tacos of Mexico, Puebla, Michoacan, wherever, Yucatan. See what they do differently. You just like plop a bunch of like meat from a bulgogi into like a tortilla and claim you made a Korean taco. You're just a lazy cook. But I don't think that's cultural appropriation. I think it's just silly,
It's some weird fusion mashup and just kind of taking the easy road.
Exactly. Christ.
You talk a lot about like Georges Perrier and the sauces, and I've really picked up a lot of books in recent years on like classical sauces because I feel like some of that stuff's falling off, and it's really fun to kind of revisit that stuff. I learned a lot in culinary school and then didn't do anything with it for like 20 years, and now kind of like dive back into that stuff.
Those are the best sauces. A lot of people, I guess. Yeah, I'm not saying this as a criticism. The first question to put in a cookbook, the very strange concept of stock reductions, and then add butter and season them as a sauce, which is a terrible idea, by the way, was Charlie Trotter. Again, not a terrible chef. One of the best chefs in American history. Someone I still like very much admire his thought process, his cooking. I still look at Charlie Trotter's books all the time. But if you look at those books, when you get to the sauce, it's just like, for the steak, veal stock reduction, you go to the pig. take some veal stock, reduce it by half, add some butter, season with salt and pepper. I'm like, what? This is like not a sauce, you know? Well, it may be a sauce to him, but then I think of George Perret, like there's somebody at Lebec, veal stock, white veal stock, demi-glace, glace de viande, chicken stock, brown chicken stock, mussel stock, fish stock, clam stock, lobster stock, game stock, Nige of vegetables. We had like 15 stocks, all the bones roasted for all the animals, 5-gallon buckets of every component of mirepoix, pre-tied bouquet garnis, beurre mayonnaise to thicken some things. Just like crazy operation. You just walked in the morning, pots on the flat top, like 15. You're just going in with like mirepoix, bones. You're grabbing bottles like you're at like a spring break, deglazing things like, everywhere. Brandy, port, Madeira, everything, white wine, vermouth. And then add all the liquids and just watch them simmer and just like, it's like amazing. And then you taste the sausage, you're like, yeah, this is why you do this stuff. This is like way better than just like trying to make some, more effort, but the rewards are clear. George should have a cookbook. Like, he has a cookbook.
Yeah.
He needs to have a book on just like sauce making.
I'm sure there's a market. We could, make that happen, Shola.
Never too late. I'll talk to him. Yeah.
So when we can travel again, where are you thinking about going?
So I'm going to go back to places I've already been and investigate them a little bit more deeper. Like, I love Indonesia for the tropical connection to like West Africa, and the food there is just unbelievable. Yeah. I would go back to Bali. And then my other favorite part of the world to try to see is the Dolomites, Trentino Alto Adige, Italy, northern, both for wine, for food, and just like the mountain food and the way they cook is just fantastic. I love it. So, and I really want to go to Sicily, so I got to make that happen at some point.
Anything else you want to get into or talk about?
Yeah, I just like to say that, we've all been you and I have been in a probably safer space than all of our friends who have restaurants and have to worry. I keep talking to people. Some people have a great head on their shoulders and are not taking it too literal, and they're adapting without letting the ego's original intent get into the way. Person I probably most admire right now is Johnny Sparrow, honestly. His pizza thing that he's doing, I'm like, dude, you're smart.
I got to get out there for that. Reverie's probably the place I've eaten at most in DC in recent years. And now he's got his pizza thing going. He's got another new concept opening up. But he did great. He did great pivoting. I mean, he even talked about like how he was out delivering personally himself, like when COVID started.
Yeah, he walked the walk, man. That guy's awesome.
So are you going to come down and do a dinner down in DC?
I'm not only going to come. I'm going to come down with Diego Moya and Joel.
That's so awesome because it's not that far from me. I couldn't make it up to Philly, so when you guys come down here,
did that dinner together. Oh, we're going to do another one. Yeah, as soon as we can travel again, the next one is at Reverie. Yeah.
Well, it's been great having you on. I'm so glad we can catch up.
We never see each other often enough, except at Star Chefs, which no longer happen. But like, let's catch up soon.
I know.
I hope the listeners enjoy this. It's kind of a all over the place, Shola ranting.
The podcast has been fun because I was doing them all in person. And then when COVID hit, I was like, well, I guess I'll figure out how to do virtual. But then it opened it up to more people. Like before I was, having to travel or do really locally. And now I'm talking to people all over the country. And it's like, I think I'm just going to do this as much as I can. Great. Yeah.
You are killing the microphone game there. That's
I'm working on it. I mean, it was not good at first. And I've had to go back and do some editing and cleaning up. And now it's like, well, if I'm going to do this from home, I need the mic set up here and have all that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. You're the man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you. I wish I could make it up to New York, but
I'll keep posting and stay warm, my friends.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show. I had a great time talking to you. And to all of our listeners, this has been Chris with the Chefs Without Restaurant podcast. As always, you can find us at chefswithoutrestaurants.com and .org and on all social media platforms. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you, Chris. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. And if you're interested in being a guest on the show or sponsoring a show, please let us know. We can be reached at chefswithoutrestaurants@gmail.com. Thanks so much.